clothes and maybe cut her hair. She had 3 days before she would kill Uncle Paul. It had to be done on Sunday. There was time. The salon on 9th Avenue was named Fabulous. Carla entered with 3 plastic Modell's bags under her arm. She spent an hour in the sporting goods store buying loose-fitting sweatpants and sweatshirts, a couple of oversized Yankee and Giants jerseys, and a Mets hat. She changed in the store dressing room and wore some of the gear out, transforming into a midtown tourist. She bought a pair of oversized sunglasses for $5 from a vendor to complete the look. The hair would be next. Carla had no doubt that she was the first salon's English-speaking customer in years. There were 3 chairs, only one occupied. The occupant wasn't having anything done, sitting and yapping in Spanish with a rail-thin woman standing behind the register podium by the door. Both seemed surprised when Carla entered and rang the bell over the door. Not having any illusions about communicating, Carla went directly to the open chair and said, "Short." The place reeked of cigarettes. The woman replied in Spanish, and Carla shook her head and made a scissors gesture just below the ear and closed her eyes. 20 minutes later, Carla looked into the mirror to see the worst haircut of her life and smiled. She paid in cash and left, putting on the cap and sunglasses, and headed up the avenue towards Central Park. She needed to get away from crowds for a while. Carla got off the R train at 77th Street and 4th Avenue in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, a little after 1 a.m. Saturday morning. She wore floppy sweatpants and an oversized plain gray sweatshirt, a black Yankees cap, and black running shoes. Beneath the garish tourist clothes, she wore her Under Armour skin-tight black pants and top. In her pack were the tools for the job: 2 screwdrivers, Phillips and flathead, a claw hammer, adjustable wrench, and, of course, the knife. Carla spent the afternoon sharpening the buck knife and going over the plan. She would go in through the shed. Paul Puglisi would be dead in less than 24 hours. Having dreamed about this day for years, Carla had committed every step she would take to memory. Uncle Paul's Italian machismo would be his undoing. Every Sunday as a child, Carla would go to Uncle Paul's for the big family dinner. Looking back, she seethed at the thought of him standing over the table with everyone waiting for him to sit before digging in. There were times when he would be on the phone or in a conversation with some underling, and they waited. Food getting cold, stomachs churning, waiting for the king to be seated. After dinner, all the children would play in the backyard. Carla, being the outcast, would play alone until the day she found her escape. She would hide in the shed at the back of the property and curl up in the large cabinets under the tool bench. Soon enough, the solace of the cabinets turned to boredom, and she sought a real escape. She didn't remember what she thought about during those hours in the dark. What did she dream of? It was dark and safe, she thought. That must have been enough. One afternoon, she discovered some loose boards on the back wall. She pulled the boards apart and crawled out to a small alleyway. The alley was narrow with cement walls on each side. It fed out to 86th Street. After a few Sundays, she mustered the courage to crawl out and down the alley. Being a child, she lost track of time as she strolled down 4th Avenue. After what must have been hours, she returned through the alley, crawled back through the boards into the shed to the family compound. No one noticed that she was gone. It hurt at first that no one had noticed her absence, but then at that age she hurt all the time. She came to look forward to the Sunday escape. She would roam the streets and revel in her freedom for a brief time.
For those of you who just tuned into our program, you're listening to International Radio Tours. I'm your host, Rich-Gehlhausen. With us today is our guest, author John Nuckel. We've been listening to some dramatic readings from his book, Grit, the second in his book series. John, I have to tell you, Carla, she's one of the most interesting characters in a book that I have read in many years. We need to talk about Carla.
Yes, we do, but first I need to talk about that dramatic reading, because that lovely voice was my beautiful daughter, Lindsay, who is an actress and a singer, and she's actually on her way this September over to Dublin, Ireland, to study theater there. So I want to thank you, Lindsay, for doing that. And she did have to send in a tape, but she did a great job. I'm very proud of her. Now, back to Carla. Yes, with these readings, you do see a little bit, the beginning, how strong and powerful she is and how she is smart and clever, and she will, manage to make her escape from, professional people sent to kill her. But there also is this vulnerability. There is this longing. There's this loneliness that she's had in her life. And, this started, I know you asked me before, Rich, this idea of the character of Carla came to me because from reading so many thrillers, there's always the killer, the assassin, the sniper or whatever. But rarely do you know what that person is about or what motivates that person to do the things that they do. And I tried to make Carla into a real live person, but really, I think the more we get to know her, the more frightening she becomes also, because especially, she was first introduced in the Vig, of course, and in Grit she gets more and more violent, and her she starts spiraling downward at an accelerating rate, to the point where near the end she really is just a frightening character. So that's really what Carla's about.
John, one of the things I do find just so compelling about this character, Carla, she is so frightening. She's an accomplished killer. And yet, as a reader, I just can't help but have empathy, compassion for her. She's so multidimensional, and she is changing. She goes through multiple changes, and she's on a mission.
Yeah. There's a key part in this book where she realizes that essentially she is trying to wipe out her past by her actions. As I guess a lot of people do. A lot of violent people have bad backgrounds, and at a certain point she realizes that she comes to that realization, which is very important. But also she realizes that the heck with that, I'm going to keep doing it anyway. So I think she crosses over at a point from being the character, even though she does terrible things, you can sympathize with her to a point because of how bad things were for her as a child. But she does reach a point of no return, where she realizes, I'm never going to change, and I enjoy doing this. And I think that's when really the script changes for Carla for the reader.
John, something that you told me actually more than once, but you told me a little story where you were completely or attempting to figure out Carla. It was during a drive.
Yeah. I had a business meeting, and it was one of those in between 2.5 hours, 2 hours. Do I take a train? Do I drive? So I decided to drive, and I was in the midst of writing. I knew that there would be a female assassin, but I just started thinking up this character, and but I got her background, I got her where I knew what the last scene you were going to see of her in the Vig. I knew what the first scene you were going to see of her. I knew it all. I knew what she looked like, and where it all came from, back in the recesses of my mind, I have absolutely no idea. But I got it all in one. 2 hours out and 2 hours back. In between, I did a business meeting. I don't think it went too well. But anyway, I got a good character out of it.
Well, we have some more dramatic readings. We have other characters we're going to talk about. I'd like to talk about. Let's talk about Frank just a little bit, and then we'll lead into. We've got a number of additional readings to go through here. Let's talk about Frank. Okay,
Frank is really the glue, the nuts and bolts of I think of the whole trilogy. He is another character who's troubled, but he sort of is the moral conscience of the trilogy, and by that I mean his morality is somewhat questionable also, as is the morality of the trilogy, because it's there's no black and whites. There's a lot of grays here. But he's troubled. But he is a way I described him once to someone is he wants to be a good person, but it doesn't come to him naturally. So he has to work on it. But he is a nice guy, and he is flawed, and he has a bad background just like Carla does. But he is, I think, a lot of people relate to him because he's real, and he takes. Whenever he takes two steps forward, he takes a step back, or maybe 2 or 3 steps back. But he does have this determination, and he has this, he has a moral center, despite all the foolish things he's done in his past and might likely do in the future.
Well,
and
like a lot
of us, and like a lot of us, and a lot of things are thrown at him also. He's in the middle of 9/11. He has had a tough childhood, but he wants to do the right things, and his defense mechanisms are usually off-putting also. One of which is he drinks too much, the other which is a pretty sharp tongue, so to speak. But he will advance forward, and he's someone you can count on, although. You probably wouldn't believe that when you first meet him. That's, I guess, is a good way to describe Frank.
Let's touch upon Brogan, the character Brogan.
Okay, Brogan is the authority in the piece. He's the authority figure. He is older, federal agent. What makes him interesting is he's past his days of glory. And just briefly, he picks up Frank on the street because Frank gets involved in some treachery in the